The footsteps behind Maya Torres were too quick to belong to anyone innocent. She had heard them the moment she stepped into the parking garage, and by the third floor, she knew they were not random. She quickened her pace, heels clicking against the concrete, her bag pressed tight to her side. The overhead lights flickered, one bulb humming weakly above her car, and the silence between each footstep behind her felt heavier than the last. Maya was not the kind of woman who imagined danger where there was none. She had grown up in a small town outside the city, the kind of place where doors were left unlocked and neighbors waved from their porches. She had moved to the city 5 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a business degree, determined to build a life for herself. She was proud of who she was, proud of her curves, proud of the confidence she had built slowly over years of learning to love herself in a world that often tried to shrink her. She did not scare easily, but tonight, something in her chest told her to run. She reached her car and fumbled for her keys, her hands trembling slightly. Before she could unlock the door, a shadow fell across the hood. "Miss Torres," a voice said, calm and low. "We just want to talk." She turned slowly. 2 men stood a few feet away, both dressed plainly, both watching her with an unsettling patience. The taller one smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I don't know you," Maya said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "No," the shorter man agreed. "But you know Dominic Reyes very well, don't you? His assistant, his shadow. That makes you useful." Maya's mind raced. Dominic Reyes was her employer, the head of Reyes Shipping and Logistics, a man known throughout the city for his sharp suits, his unreadable expression, and his reputation for never losing a negotiation. She had worked for him for 3 years. She organized his calendar, filtered his calls, remembered his coffee order without being asked. He was demanding, precise, and distant, but he had never once made her feel unsafe. Until now, when 2 strangers spoke his name like a threat. "I don't know what you want," Maya said, backing toward her car door. "I just work for him. I'm not involved in whatever this is." "That's exactly why you're perfect," the taller man said, stepping closer. "A message works best when it's delivered through someone he cares about protecting." Maya's heart slammed against her ribs. She glanced toward the stairwell, toward the elevator, toward any exit that might save her. There was none close enough. The men were between her and every way out. "Please," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I don't have anything to do with his business." "That's not up to you," the shorter man said. He reached for her arm. Maya twisted away, stumbling into the side of her car, her bag slipping from her shoulder. Her mind screamed at her to fight, to scream, to do anything, but her body felt frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. This could not be happening. Not on an ordinary Tuesday night. Not after a day spent organizing spreadsheets and rescheduling meetings. The man's fingers closed around her wrist. And then, everything changed. A third figure appeared from the stairwell entrance, moving with a speed that did not match the calm, composed man Maya saw every day in his glass office. Dominic Reyes crossed the distance in seconds, his expression unreadable, his movements precise and controlled. Before the man holding Maya's wrist could react, Dominic had already closed the space between them. "Let go of her," Dominic said. His voice was quiet. That was the part that frightened Maya more than any shout could have. The 2 men exchanged a glance, clearly recalculating. They had not expected him to be here. They had not expected him to move so fast. "This doesn't concern you tonight," the taller man said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "She works for me," Dominic said, "which means it concerns me entirely." What happened next unfolded in a blur that Maya would replay in her mind for weeks afterward. Dominic stepped fully between her and the 2 men, his body a wall she had not asked for and could not have imagined needing. There was a brief, tense exchange of words she barely understood, followed by movement too fast for her to process. Within moments, both men were retreating, one clutching his arm, the other glancing nervously toward the stairwell as if expecting more trouble to arrive. "This isn't over," the taller man said, backing away. "It is for tonight," Dominic replied, his tone final. The men disappeared into the shadows of the garage, their footsteps fading into silence. Maya stood frozen against her car, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. Dominic turned to her, and for the first time in 3 years, she saw something other than composed authority in his eyes. She saw concern. Genuine, unguarded concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Maya shook her head, though she was not entirely sure it was true. Her wrist throbbed where the man had grabbed her, and her legs felt unsteady beneath her. "Who were they?" she managed to ask. "What did they want with me?" Dominic's jaw tightened. He glanced around the garage, scanning the shadows as though he expected more trouble, before turning his attention back to her. "We need to leave," he said. "I'll explain everything, but not here." "Dominic," Maya said, her voice firmer now despite the tremor still running through her hands. "I deserve to know what just happened." "You do," he agreed. "And you will. I promise you that. But right now, standing in this garage is not safe for either of us." Maya hesitated. Every instinct told her to demand answers immediately, to refuse to move until she understood what had just happened. But there was something in Dominic's expression, something urgent and sincere, that made her trust him, despite the chaos of the last few minutes. "Fine," she said, "but I want the truth. All of it." "You'll have it," Dominic said. "I owe you that much." He guided her toward his car, his hand hovering near her back without quite touching her, as though he wanted to protect her without overstepping. Maya climbed into the passenger seat, her legs still shaking, her mind spinning with questions. She watched as Dominic circled to the driver's side, his movements calm now, though she noticed the way his eyes kept flicking toward the mirrors, checking, watching, alert in a way she had never seen from him before. As he started the engine, Maya glanced down and noticed something on his knuckles. A small scrape, barely visible, but enough to make her stomach twist. She said nothing, though the sight lingered in her mind as the car pulled out of the garage and into the quiet city night. The drive was silent for the first few minutes, the city lights sliding past the windows in streaks of gold and white. Maya stared out at the passing buildings, trying to steady her breathing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Two strangers had known her name. They had known her connection to Dominic. They had called her useful, as though she were a tool to be used against him. "Are you going to explain?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. Dominic's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "I will. I just need to know you're somewhere safe first." "I was safe in that garage until those men showed up," Maya said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Somewhere safe apparently doesn't exist tonight." "You're right," Dominic admitted, "and I'm sorry for that. More sorry than you probably realize." Maya studied his profile in the dim light of passing street lamps. She had worked closely with him for years, had seen him negotiate impossible deals, had seen him remain calm under pressure that would have broken most people. But she had never seen him like this, alert, protective, carrying a weight that seemed to have settled onto his shoulders the moment those men appeared. "Those men mentioned your business," Maya said. "They said I was leverage." "What does that mean, Dominic?" He exhaled slowly, his grip on the wheel loosening slightly. "It means my business is more complicated than shipping contracts and cargo routes." "What does that mean?" Maya pressed. "It means," Dominic said carefully, "that the version of me you see in the office every day is only part of who I am. There is another part of my life, one I have worked very hard to keep separate from everyone who works for me, especially you." Maya's stomach dropped. She had always known there were rumors about Dominic, whispers among other employees about his connections, about the kind of respect and fear his name commanded outside the office walls. She had dismissed them as exaggeration, as the kind of gossip that followed any powerful private man. Now, sitting beside him with her wrist still aching from a stranger's grip, she was no longer sure the rumors had been exaggeration at all. "Are you saying you're dangerous?" she asked quietly. Dominic did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, but there was something raw beneath it. "I'm saying that the people who came after you tonight believe hurting you would hurt me, and they're not entirely wrong." Maya turned to look at him fully, searching his face for some explanation that would make sense of everything spinning through her mind. But before she could ask another question, Dominic's phone buzzed sharply in the console between them. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "We need to change direction," he said, his voice suddenly urgent. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, alarm rising in her chest again. "Those men weren't working alone," Dominic said, turning the car sharply down a side street, "and I think they already know exactly where we're headed." Maya gripped the edge of her seat, her heart pounding, as the city blurred past the windows once more. Whatever ordinary life she had built for herself over the past 3 years, whatever comfortable routine she had settled into as Dominic Reyes's quiet, capable assistant, felt like it was unraveling with every passing second. She had walked into that parking garage as an assistant heading home after a long day. She was leaving it as something else entirely, though she did not yet know what that would mean. "Dominic," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "whatever this is, whatever you're not telling me, I need you to trust me enough to say it." He glanced at her briefly, his expression softening despite the tension radiating from him. "I will," he said. "I promise you, Maya. Just not while we're moving. Not until I know you're truly safe." Maya nodded, though her mind was far from settled. She looked out the window again, watching the city lights blur into streaks of color, and wondered how much her life had already changed in the span of a single evening. She thought of her ordinary morning, her coffee, her calendar full of meetings and reminders. She thought of the calm, controlled man she had worked for every day, and the different man now sitting beside her, alert and protective, carrying secrets she was only beginning to understand. Whatever came next, she realized, there was no simple way back to the life she had known before tonight. Dominic drove through a maze of side streets, taking turns that seemed random to Maya, but that she suspected were anything but. His eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, and every so often his jaw tightened as though he were counting seconds, measuring distance, calculating something Maya could not see. She sat quietly beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, trying to steady the tremor that still ran through her fingers. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Somewhere secure," Dominic said. "A property most people don't know belongs to me." "Most people," Maya repeated. "But not the people who sent those men." "No," Dominic admitted. "Not them, which is why we're not going there directly." He took another sharp turn, weaving through a quieter part of the city, where the streetlights grew sparse, and the buildings turned from glass towers to old brick warehouses. Maya watched the change in scenery with growing unease, though she found herself trusting the calm precision in Dominic's movements. Whatever chaos surrounded them, he seemed entirely in control of it, and that steadiness became the only thing keeping her fear from spiraling into panic. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "Please, even if it's just pieces. I can't sit in silence wondering what almost happened to me tonight." Dominic exhaled, his shoulders lowering slightly, as though he had been waiting for her to ask again, waiting for permission to finally let the truth surface. "My family has been involved in certain business dealings for generations," he began carefully. "Shipping is real, the company is real, but it has also long served as a cover for other operations, ones that exist outside the reach of ordinary law. I inherited that world when my father passed, the same year you were hired." Maya's mind flashed back to 3 years ago, to the quiet, grieving man who had interviewed her for the assistant position, his eyes tired, his manner formal but not unkind. She had never known what he had lost that year, only that he carried himself with a heaviness she had assumed was simply his personality. "So you're saying your family runs some kind of criminal organization?" Maya said slowly, testing the words. "I'm saying my family controls certain territories, certain agreements between powerful people, certain balances that keep peace between groups who would otherwise destroy each other and everyone caught between them," Dominic said. "It is not something I take pride in, Maya. It is something I inherited, and something I have spent years trying to manage, without losing myself entirely. And tonight," Maya said, "someone decided to use me to get to you." "Yes," Dominic said, his voice tightening. "There is a rival family, the Castellanos, who have been trying to push into territory that has belonged to mine for over 20 years. Recently, negotiations broke down. Badly. They believe striking at the people around me will force me into concessions I would never otherwise make." Maya stared at him, the pieces slowly assembling into a picture she could barely comprehend. She was not part of his world. She organized his schedule. She reminded him of birthdays and drafted his emails. She was, by every measure she understood, an ordinary employee, living an ordinary life. "Why me?" she asked. "I'm not your family. I'm not your partner. I'm your assistant." Dominic's hands tightened on the wheel again, his expression flickering with something Maya could not quite identify. "Because you are the person I spend the most time with outside of business meetings." Because anyone watching my life closely would see how much I rely on you, how much of my day is built around your presence. They assumed, correctly, that hurting you would hurt me in ways that hurting a business partner never could. The car fell silent for a long moment, the weight of his words settling over Maya like a heavy blanket she had not asked to wear. She thought of the countless mornings she had brought him coffee exactly the way he liked it, the late nights she had stayed to finish reports without complaint, the quiet trust that had built slowly between them over years of working side by side. She had always assumed that trust was simply professional, the natural result of years spent in close proximity. She was beginning to understand it might have been something more, something neither of them had ever acknowledged aloud. You said you'd explain everything, Maya said. Does that mean this is the whole truth? No pieces left out? Dominic glanced at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, before softening. There is more, he admitted, but some of it is not mine to explain in a moving car, with danger still following us. I promise you the rest, once we're somewhere secure. Maya nodded slowly, though her mind continued to race with unanswered questions. She looked out the window again, watching the warehouses give way to a quieter residential area, the streets lined with tall iron gates, and long driveways hidden behind manicured hedges, the kind of neighborhood she had only ever seen in photographs, never imagined herself entering under circumstances like these. Dominic slowed the car as they approached a large gate, tapping a code into a panel before the iron doors swung open silently. The driveway beyond curved through a stretch of trees, before revealing a large stone house, its windows glowing warmly against the darkness of the surrounding property. This is your home? Maya asked, staring up at the building as the car came to a stop. One of them, Dominic said, the one very few people know about. He came around to open her door before she could reach for the handle herself, offering his hand to help her out of the car. Maya hesitated only a moment before accepting it, her fingers still trembling slightly as they closed around his. You're safe here, Dominic said quietly. I promise you that. Maya wanted to believe him completely, but the events of the evening had shaken something loose inside her, some quiet certainty she had always carried about the predictability of her own life. She followed him toward the house, glancing back once toward the gate, half expecting to see shadows moving beyond it. Inside, the house was warm and quiet, decorated with the kind of understated elegance Maya might have expected from Dominic's office, but had never imagined extending into his personal life. A woman appeared from a side hallway almost immediately, her expression shifting from calm efficiency to concern the moment she noticed Maya's trembling hands. Mr. Reyes, the woman said, is everyone all right? We're fine, Louise, Dominic said. Please prepare a guest room. Miss Torres will be staying with us for a while. Louise nodded without hesitation, disappearing down the hallway to attend to the request. Maya watched her go, struck by the ease with which the household seemed to absorb sudden, unexpected instructions, as though emergencies of this kind were not entirely unfamiliar within these walls. Come, Dominic said gently, guiding Maya toward a sitting room off the main hallway. Let me look at your wrist. Maya glanced down, only now remembering the ache where the man in the garage had grabbed her. A faint bruise was already beginning to form, dark against her skin. It's fine, she said, though she winced slightly as Dominic examined it carefully, his fingers gentle, despite the strength she had witnessed in the garage only an hour before. It's not fine, Dominic said quietly. None of this should have happened to you. But it did, Maya said, and I still don't fully understand why. Dominic straightened, his expression serious as he met her eyes. Because for 3 years, I have kept you deliberately separate from every dangerous part of my life. I built walls around you without you even realizing it, made certain you never crossed paths with the world my family operates in. Tonight, those walls failed, and I take full responsibility for that failure. Maya studied him carefully, searching for any trace of the composed, distant boss she had known for years. She found instead a man burdened by guilt, genuinely shaken by the possibility that his world had nearly cost her far more than a bruised wrist. Why did you protect walls around me at all? Maya asked quietly. I'm just your assistant, Dominic. Why would that matter enough to you, to build walls in the first place? The question hung in the air between them, heavier than either of them seemed prepared to answer honestly. Dominic's jaw tightened, and for a long moment he said nothing, his eyes searching Maya's face, as though weighing exactly how much truth he was willing to offer. Because somewhere along the last 3 years, he finally said, his voice low, you stopped being just my assistant, and I have spent a long time refusing to admit that to myself, let alone to you. Maya's breath caught, the weight of his words settling over her in a way she had not expected. Whatever she had imagined this night might reveal, she had not prepared herself for this particular truth, spoken so plainly, so unguarded, by a man she had never once seen falter. Dominic, she began, though she was not entirely sure what she intended to say next. Before she could continue, Louise reappeared in the doorway, her expression tense. Mr. Reyes, there's someone at the gate requesting entry. He says it's urgent. Dominic's entire posture shifted instantly, the vulnerability from moments before replaced by sharp, controlled alertness. Who is it? He says his name is Victor Calloway, Louise said. He says you'll want to hear what he has to say. Dominic's expression darkened immediately. Victor works closely with the Castellano family, he said quietly, more to himself than to Maya or Louise. If he's here, it means they already know exactly where we are. Maya felt her stomach twist painfully at the news, the fragile sense of safety she had begun to build inside these walls collapsing all at once. What does that mean for us? She asked. Dominic turned to her, his expression resolute despite the tension radiating from him. It means the danger from tonight isn't over, not even close. But I promise you this, Maya. Whatever happens next, you will not face it alone. He reached for her hand, his grip firm and reassuring despite the uncertainty of everything unfolding around them. Maya held on tightly, drawing strength from his steadiness, even as her mind raced with fear over what Victor Calloway's unexpected arrival might mean for both of them. Outside, beyond the iron gate, a car idled quietly in the darkness, its headlights cutting through the night like a warning neither of them could ignore. Dominic left Maya in the sitting room, with strict instructions to stay away from the windows, though she found it impossible to sit still. She paced the length of the room, her arms wrapped around herself, listening to the muffled sound of voices near the front gate. Every so often she caught fragments of Dominic's voice, low and controlled, though she could not make out the words clearly enough to understand what was being discussed. After what felt like an eternity, the front door opened, and Dominic returned, his expression unreadable. Behind him walked a man Maya had never seen before, tall and lean, dressed in a dark coat that seemed slightly too formal for the late hour. His eyes moved across the room with quiet calculation, settling briefly on Maya before returning to Dominic. This is Victor Calloway, Dominic said, his tone carefully neutral. He claims he's here to help. Claims, Victor repeated, a faint smile touching his lips. I prefer to think of it as fact, but I understand your hesitation, Dominic, given the circumstances. Why are you here? Dominic asked, his voice sharp despite its quiet control. Victor's gaze shifted toward Maya again, lingering just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Because the men who approached your assistant tonight were not acting under my family's official orders. They were acting under Salvatore Castellano's personal instruction, without the knowledge or approval of the rest of the family council. Dominic's expression hardened. Are you suggesting there's a divide within your own organization? I'm suggesting exactly that, Victor said. Salvatore has grown reckless in recent months, convinced that striking at your personal life will force concessions the council would never officially sanction. Several of us believe his methods threaten the stability both families have spent years maintaining. Maya listened to the exchange with growing confusion, trying to piece together the layers of alliances and rivalries unfolding in front of her. She had walked into an ordinary evening believing herself entirely separate from this world, and now she stood in the middle of what appeared to be an internal conflict within a rival organization, one that had already put her safety at risk once tonight. Why come to me directly? Dominic asked. Why not handle this within your own council? Because Salvatore moves quickly, and the council moves slowly, Victor said. By the time we convene a proper discussion, he may have already escalated matters beyond anyone's control. I came to warn you, Dominic, and to offer information that might help you protect what matters most to you before Salvatore decides to strike again. Dominic's eyes flicked briefly toward Maya before returning to Victor, his jaw tightening at the implication. What information? Victor withdrew a small folded paper from his coat and extended it toward Dominic. The location Salvatore intends to use for his next attempt, along with the timeline he's operating under. I suggest you act on it quickly. Dominic took the paper, studying it in silence for a long moment, before folding it carefully and slipping it into his pocket. Why should I trust information from a man aligned with the family that just tried to have my assistant harmed? You shouldn't trust me blindly, Victor said, but you should recognize that my interests align with yours in this particular matter. I have no desire to see this conflict spiral into something neither family can control. If Salvatore succeeds in provoking you into open warfare, both our organizations suffer consequences neither of us want. Maya watched Dominic's expression carefully, searching for some sign of how he intended to respond. She had never seen him navigate a conversation quite like this one, weighing trust and suspicion in equal measure, calculating risks she could barely comprehend. I'll consider what you've told me, Dominic finally said, but if this information proves false, or if it leads to further harm against anyone under my protection, you should understand there will be consequences. Victor nodded, seemingly unsurprised by the warning. Understood. I hope, for both our sakes, that this proves useful rather than costly. He turned to leave, pausing briefly to glance once more toward Maya. You're fortunate, Miss Torres, to have a man like Dominic Reyes standing between you and the world Salvatore Castellano represents. Not everyone in your position is so lucky. With that, he disappeared through the front door, and moments later, Maya heard the distant sound of a car engine fading into the night. Dominic remained still for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the closed door, his expression carrying the weight of everything Victor had just revealed. Do you believe him? Maya finally asked. I believe some of it, Dominic said slowly. Victor has never given me false information before, but that doesn't mean his motives are entirely selfless. He's protecting his own interests as much as offering me a warning. And Salvatore Castellano, Maya said carefully. He's the one responsible for tonight. Yes, Dominic said, and according to Victor, he intends to try again. Maya felt a fresh wave of fear settle over her, though this time it was accompanied by something else, a slow-building determination she had not expected to feel. She had spent the last few hours reacting to danger she did not understand, following instructions, trusting Dominic's judgment without question. But standing in this quiet room, listening to the details of a threat that specifically targeted her, she found herself wanting more than protection. She wanted understanding, and perhaps even a role in whatever came next. What happens now? She asked. Dominic turned to face her fully, his expression softening slightly despite the tension still visible in his shoulders. Now, we take precautions. I'll have additional security stationed around the property immediately, and I'll review the information Victor provided to determine how much of it we can act on safely. And me? Maya asked. What happens to me in all of this? You stay here, Dominic said firmly, where I can ensure your safety. Maya crossed her arms, a flicker of frustration cutting through her fear. Dominic, I appreciate everything you've done tonight, truly, but I can't simply become a passive bystander in my own life. If Salvatore Castellano believes hurting me will hurt you, then I'm already involved whether either of us likes it or not. Dominic studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes that Maya could not entirely interpret. You're right, he admitted quietly. You are involved now, in ways I wish desperately I could undo. But that doesn't mean I'm willing to let you take unnecessary risks. I'm not asking to take risks, Maya said. I'm asking to understand what I'm facing, so I'm not caught helpless again the next time something like tonight happens. Dominic's expression softened further, something like respect flickering across his features. All right, he said. I'll make sure you understand everything relevant to your safety. But Maya, I need you to trust my judgment when it comes to decisions about your protection. Can you do that? Maya considered his request carefully, weighing her desire for control against the reality of a world she barely understood. I can trust your judgment, she finally said, as long as you promise to keep trusting me with the truth. I promise, Dominic said, and something in his voice told her he meant it entirely. Louise appeared quietly in the doorway then, informing them that the guest room had been prepared and that additional security personnel had already begun arriving at the property. Dominic nodded his thanks before turning back to Maya. You should rest, he said gently. Tomorrow, we'll go over everything Victor provided, and I'll explain whatever else you need to know about the world you've unexpectedly found yourself part of. Maya nodded, exhaustion finally beginning to catch up with the adrenaline that had carried her through the night's events. As Louise led her toward the guest room, she glanced back once toward Dominic, finding him still standing in the sitting room, his eyes fixed on some distant point, as though already calculating his next move. Whatever tomorrow brought, Maya realized, she was no longer simply an assistant caught in the crossfire of someone else's dangerous world. She was becoming something else entirely, though she could not yet say exactly what that meant for the life she thought she had built for herself. As she settled into the unfamiliar guest room, the soft hum of security personnel moving quietly around the property outside her window, Maya found herself thinking not of fear, but of the unexpected honesty Dominic had offered her earlier that evening. Somewhere along the last 3 years, he had said, she had stopped being just his assistant. She replayed those words over and over, as sleep finally began to claim her, wondering what they might mean for both of them, once the danger surrounding them finally passed. But for now, danger remained very much present, and somewhere beyond the walls of this quiet estate, Salvatore Castellano was undoubtedly already planning his next move. Morning arrived quietly over the estate, sunlight filtering through the curtains of the guest room, where Maya had finally managed a few hours of restless sleep. She woke slowly, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar surroundings, before the events of the previous night rushed back to her all at once. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding as she remembered the garage, the 2 strangers, Dominic's sudden intervention, and the strange visit from Victor Calloway that had followed. A soft knock sounded at her door before Louise entered, carrying a tray with coffee and a light breakfast. "Good morning, Miss Torres," she said warmly. "Mr. Reyes asked me to let you know he's available whenever you're ready to talk." Maya thanked her, grateful for the small kindness amid the chaos surrounding her new circumstances. She dressed quickly in clothes Louise had thoughtfully provided, aware that she had left the office the previous night with nothing more than her purse and the clothes she had been wearing. She found Dominic in a sunlit study at the back of the house, several documents spread across his desk, his expression focused despite the early hour. He looked up as she entered, something warm flickering briefly across his features before settling into careful composure. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I expected," Maya admitted, taking a seat across from him. "Though I still have more questions than answers." "I promised you answers," Dominic said. "Where would you like to begin?" Maya considered the question carefully. There were so many threads to pull, so many pieces of this new reality she barely understood. "Tell me about Salvatore Castellano," she finally said. "If he's the reason I was targeted, I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Dominic nodded, leaning back slightly in his chair. Salvatore inherited leadership of the Castellano family 2 years ago, after his father stepped down due to health issues. Unlike his father, who valued stability and long-term agreements, Salvatore is ambitious in ways that often ignore caution. He's been trying to expand into shipping routes that have belonged to my family for decades, routes that generate significant revenue for both legitimate and less legitimate purposes. And negotiations failed, Maya said, recalling what he had told her the previous night. "Badly," Dominic confirmed. "Several months ago, we attempted to reach an agreement that would allow him limited access to certain routes in exchange for concessions elsewhere. He rejected the offer, believing he could simply take what he wanted through force rather than negotiation. So he targeted me to pressure you," Maya said slowly, "believing it would force you into the concessions he wants." "Yes," Dominic said, his jaw tightening slightly. "It's a tactic as old as this world itself, unfortunately. Target the people closest to your rival, and hope the resulting pressure forces a favorable outcome." Maya absorbed this information carefully, trying to reconcile the calculated cruelty of the strategy with the reality of her own ordinary life just 24 hours earlier. "What did Victor's information reveal exactly?" she asked. "You mentioned a location and timeline." Dominic retrieved the folded paper from his desk drawer, sliding it across to her. Maya studied the details, her stomach tightening at the specificity of the plans described. According to the information, Salvatore intended to make another attempt within the week, this time targeting a charity event Dominic's company was scheduled to sponsor. "This event," Maya said, glancing up, "I organized the details for this myself weeks ago. Everyone will be expecting me there." "Which is exactly why it presents an opportunity for Salvatore," Dominic said grimly. "A public setting, your expected presence, and enough chaos to make an attempt seem plausible, without immediately exposing his involvement." Maya set the paper down carefully, her mind racing through the implications. "What do we do?" she asked. "We have options," Dominic said. "We could cancel your attendance entirely, removing the opportunity Salvatore is counting on. We could increase security dramatically, making any attempt too costly for him to risk. Or we could use the situation to our advantage, setting a trap that exposes his involvement definitively to the family council Victor mentioned." "A trap," Maya repeated, something steadying in her voice despite the fear still lingering beneath it. "You mean using the event to catch him in the act?" "It's risky," Dominic admitted, "and I won't pursue that option unless you're fully willing and fully informed of everything it would require." Maya considered the possibilities carefully. Canceling her attendance felt like surrendering to fear, allowing Salvatore's tactics to dictate the shape of her life indefinitely. Increasing security alone might delay the danger without resolving it. But the idea of actively confronting the threat, of taking some measure of control over a situation that had left her feeling powerless just hours earlier, appealed to something resilient within her that refused to simply hide. "Tell me what the trap would involve," she said. Dominic studied her for a long moment, something like admiration flickering across his expression before he began explaining the details. The plan involved allowing Maya's attendance at the event to proceed as originally planned, but with substantial security measures in place that would remain hidden from public view. Trusted associates would monitor the venue from discreet positions, ready to intervene the moment any threat became apparent. Meanwhile, Dominic would ensure that key members of the Castellano family council were present as invited guests, positioned to witness any attempt Salvatore made firsthand. "If this works," Dominic explained, "Salvatore's own council will see undeniable proof of his reckless disregard for the agreements meant to keep peace between our families. It would likely result in consequences from within his own organization, consequences far more effective than anything I could impose directly." "And if it doesn't work?" Maya asked. "Then we ensure your safety takes absolute priority over exposing his scheme," Dominic said firmly. "No plan is worth risking your life, Maya. I need you to understand that clearly before agreeing to anything." Maya appreciated the sincerity in his words, the clear boundary he drew around her safety, despite the strategic value of the plan he had just described. She thought of the last 3 years, the quiet trust that had built slowly between them, and the surprising honesty he had offered the previous night about how his feelings toward her had shifted over time. "I trust you to protect me," she said quietly, "and I'm willing to move forward with this plan, if it means finally putting an end to the danger hanging over both of us." Dominic's expression softened, something grateful and relieved passing briefly across his features. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me with this, and for your courage in facing it." Over the following days, Maya found herself drawn deeper into the careful preparations surrounding the event, learning details of security positioning and contingency plans she never could have imagined discussing just a week earlier. She met several of Dominic's trusted associates, each of them professional and respectful despite the danger surrounding their work. She began to understand the careful balance Dominic maintained between the legitimate business she had always known and the more complicated world operating alongside it. During quiet moments between preparations, Maya and Dominic found themselves talking more openly than they ever had during their years of professional interaction. Dominic spoke of the loneliness that came with his inherited responsibilities, the difficulty of trusting anyone fully given the constant calculations required by his position. Maya shared stories of her own life, the years spent building confidence in herself despite a world that often tried to make her feel smaller than she was, the small joys and struggles that had shaped who she had become. "You've never once made me feel like less because of my size," Maya admitted one evening, as they sat together in the quiet study, reviewing final details of the security plan. "Most people, even without meaning to, treat me differently, but you never have." Dominic looked at her carefully, something warm and sincere in his expression. "Because your size has never been what I noticed most about you," he said. "I noticed your intelligence first, your capability, the way you handled impossible situations with a calm I envied. Later, I noticed how genuinely kind you are, how much care you bring into every interaction, whether with me or with anyone else in the office. Your size was never something I viewed as a measure of your worth, Maya. It never crossed my mind that way." Maya felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words, a warmth that had nothing to do with the danger still surrounding them, and everything to do with the growing bond developing between them despite everything working against it. That means more to me than you probably realize, she said quietly. I meant every word, Dominic said, his voice steady and sincere. As the day of the charity event approached, the careful preparations intensified, and Maya found herself both anxious and strangely resolute about the role she would play in confronting the danger threatening both her safety and Dominic's carefully balanced world. Whatever happened during the event itself, she realized, she was no longer simply a bystander caught in someone else's conflict. She had become an active participant in her own protection, willing to face danger directly rather than hide from it indefinitely. The night before the event, Dominic found her standing quietly on the balcony outside her room, looking out over the darkened grounds of the estate. He joined her without a word, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence beside her. "Are you frightened?" he asked softly. "Terrified," Maya admitted, "but also determined. I refuse to let Salvatore Castellano define the rest of my life through fear." Dominic reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining gently with hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "I will be beside you every step of the way. I promise you that." Maya squeezed his hand gently, drawing strength from the steady warmth of his presence. Tomorrow would bring danger, uncertainty, and the culmination of everything they had carefully prepared for over the past several days. But standing beside Dominic in the quiet darkness of the estate, Maya felt something unexpected amid all the fear and uncertainty surrounding her circumstances. She felt hope. The charity event unfolded beneath a canopy of soft lights strung across the hotel garden, guests mingling in elegant clothing as string music drifted through the warm evening air. Maya stood near the entrance, greeting arriving donors with the same practiced grace she had brought to countless events over the years, though tonight every smile she offered concealed a current of tension running just beneath the surface. She wore a deep green gown that Louise had helped her select earlier that day, one that made her feel confident and grounded, despite the danger she knew lingered somewhere within tonight's carefully arranged crowd. Dominic remained close throughout the evening, his presence a steady reassurance even as his eyes continuously scanned the surrounding guests with quiet vigilance. "Remember the signals we discussed," he murmured to her during a brief pause between greeting guests. "If anything feels wrong, don't hesitate." Maya nodded, her heart beating steadily despite the anxiety coursing through her. She had memorized the security positions, the discreet exits, the trusted associates scattered throughout the crowd, disguised as ordinary attendees. Somewhere among tonight's guests, members of the Castellano family council were also present, invited under the pretense of strengthening diplomatic relations between the two families. The evening progressed smoothly for the first 2 hours. Speeches delivered, donations announced, polite conversation flowing easily among the gathered guests. Maya began to wonder whether Salvatore had somehow learned of their preparations and abandoned his plans entirely, though Dominic's continued alertness suggested he remained unconvinced the danger had passed. It was during the final hour of the event, as guests began mingling near the dessert tables scattered across the garden, that Maya noticed a man watching her, with an unsettling intensity from near the garden's edge. She recognized him instantly, despite his formal attire tonight, as the taller of the two men who had approached her in the parking garage days earlier. Her breath caught, and she glanced discreetly toward Dominic, who had already noticed the direction of her gaze, and subtly shifted his position closer to her side. "He's here," Maya whispered. "I see him," Dominic said quietly. "Stay calm. Everyone is in position." The man began moving through the crowd, weaving between guests with deliberate casualness that nonetheless carried an undercurrent of purpose. Maya felt her pulse quicken as he drew closer, though she forced herself to maintain a composed expression, trusting the careful preparations they had spent days arranging. As the man reached the edge of the garden path near where Maya stood, he reached into his jacket, and for a terrifying moment, Maya's mind flooded with memories of the parking garage, the fear of being cornered and helpless. But before he could complete whatever action he intended, 2 of Dominic's associates emerged smoothly from the surrounding crowd, positioning themselves on either side of the man with practiced efficiency. "I think you've mistaken this event for somewhere you're welcome," one of the associates said quietly, his tone pleasant enough to avoid drawing attention from nearby guests, though his grip on the man's arm left no room for misunderstanding. The man's eyes darted toward Maya and Dominic, calculation flashing across his features before he attempted to pull away. His resistance lasted only a moment before he was guided firmly but quietly toward a side entrance, away from the main gathering of guests, who remained entirely unaware of the confrontation unfolding at the edges of their celebration. Dominic moved quickly toward the small gathering of Castellano family council members standing near the garden's fountain, his expression composed despite the tension Maya knew he carried. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, "I believe you should see this." The council members followed him toward the side entrance, where the associates had brought the captured man to a quiet corridor away from public view. Maya followed closely, her heart still pounding, though a fierce satisfaction was beginning to replace her earlier fear. "This man," Dominic said, addressing the council members directly, "was sent by Salvatore to make another attempt against my assistant tonight, at an event meant to strengthen diplomatic relations between our families. I believe this demonstrates clearly the recklessness with which he has been operating, entirely without your knowledge or approval." The council members exchanged troubled glances, their expressions shifting from surprise to visible anger as they processed the implications of what Dominic had just revealed. One of them, an older man with graying hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward to examine the captured associate more closely. "Is this true?" he demanded. "Did Salvatore send you here tonight?" The man hesitated only briefly before nodding, clearly recognizing that denial would serve no purpose given the circumstances. "He wanted this handled quietly," the man admitted. "He said the council didn't need to know the details." The older council member's expression darkened considerably. "Salvatore has exceeded his authority significantly," he said, turning to address his fellow council members. "This behavior threatens the stability of agreements our families have maintained for decades. It cannot continue unaddressed." Maya watched the exchange with a mixture of relief and disbelief, hardly able to process that the danger threatening her life for the past several days was finally being confronted directly, not through violence, but through the careful exposure of Salvatore's reckless disregard for the boundaries meant to protect innocent people caught within his ambitions. "We will handle this matter internally," the council member continued, addressing Dominic directly. "Salvatore's actions tonight will not go unanswered, and I assure you, the threats against your assistant will cease immediately." "Thank you," Dominic said, his relief evident despite his composed demeanor. "I hope this resolves matters between our families without further conflict." "It will," the council member said firmly. "You have my word on that." The captured man was quietly escorted away by the council members, leaving Dominic and Maya standing together in the quiet corridor, the distant sounds of the celebration continuing obliviously in the garden beyond. Maya finally allowed herself to exhale fully, the tension that had gripped her for days, beginning to loosen its hold at last. "Is it really over?" she asked softly. Dominic turned to her, his expression filled with relief, and something deeper that Maya recognized immediately as genuine affection. "I believe it is," he said. "The council will ensure Salvatore faces consequences for his actions, consequences that will prevent him from attempting anything like this again." Maya felt tears of relief threatening at the corners of her eyes, the accumulated fear and tension of the past several days finally beginning to release. Dominic reached for her gently, drawing her into an embrace that felt entirely natural, despite the formality that had always defined their professional relationship before this week's extraordinary events. "You were incredibly brave tonight," Dominic murmured against her hair. "I've never been more proud of anyone in my life." Maya pulled back slightly to look up at him, her heart full despite the exhaustion of everything they had endured together. "I couldn't have done any of this without you standing beside me," she said, literally and figuratively. Dominic smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that Maya had rarely seen from him during their years of professional interaction. "Maya," he said softly, "I meant what I told you the other night. Somewhere along these past 3 years, you became far more important to me than any assistant could ever be. I understand if circumstances have made it difficult to separate genuine feeling from the chaos of recent events, but I need you to know clearly how I feel about you." Maya's heart swelled with an emotion she had been carefully guarding against, acknowledging fully over the past several days, fearful that danger and adrenaline might be distorting feelings that deserved clearer circumstances to develop honestly. But standing here now, with the immediate threat finally resolved, she recognized the depth of genuine connection that had been building steadily between them, long before any hitmen had ever entered her life. "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "I have for longer than I probably realized." Dominic's expression filled with quiet joy, and he leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead, a tender gesture that spoke volumes despite its simplicity. "Then perhaps," he said, "we can finally explore what that means, once the chaos of tonight settles properly behind us." Maya laughed softly, relief and happiness intermingling as she leaned into him. "I'd like that very much." Over the following weeks, life slowly began settling into a new rhythm for Maya, one that balanced her continuing role within Dominic's company, alongside a deepening personal relationship neither of them had anticipated when she first accepted the assistant position 3 years earlier. Salvatore Castellano, true to the council's promise, faced significant consequences within his own organization, consequences that effectively ended any further threats against Maya's safety. Maya found herself embracing this new chapter of her life with a confidence she had never fully possessed before, no longer defined solely by fear or uncertainty, but by the strength she had discovered within herself during the most dangerous week of her life. She had faced hitmen, danger, and the terrifying unknown of a hidden world she never imagined existing alongside her own, and she had emerged from it not as a victim, but as someone capable of standing firmly beside the man she had come to love. Dominic, for his part, found himself changed as well, softened in ways he had not believed possible, given the demanding responsibilities of his inherited world. Maya's presence brought warmth into a life that had grown increasingly isolated over the years, and her unwavering courage during their shared crisis had shown him a strength of character he valued more deeply than he had ever expected to find in another person. Months later, as the two of them stood together on the same balcony where they had once shared quiet, fearful conversation the night before facing danger together, Maya reflected on how completely her life had transformed since that terrifying evening in the parking garage. She had walked into that garage as an ordinary assistant, uncertain of her own worth in a world that often overlooked people who looked like her. She had walked out of the danger that followed as someone entirely different, confident in her own strength, and deeply loved by a man who had never once seen her as anything less than extraordinary. "No regrets?" Dominic asked softly, echoing sentiments they had shared quietly many times since that fateful night. Maya smiled, leaning contentedly against him as the warm evening breeze drifted across the quiet estate grounds. "None at all," she said. "Everything that happened led me here, to exactly where I was always meant to be." Dominic pulled her closer, and together they watched the sunset stretch warm colors across the horizon, the danger of their past finally behind them, and an entire future of possibility stretching ahead, built on trust, courage, and a love neither of them had expected but both had come to cherish completely.